Great Depression was the most severe economic downturn in the history of the United States. It began on October 29, 1929, a day known as the Black Tuesday, when the stock market crashed.
It was huge. Banks failed, the country's money supply diminished. The whole country just fell into a cycle. We could see the despair in people during the Great Depression. For example, in an interview to Kitty McCulloch, where she said, "A man came to my door. He said, 'You don't suppose you could have a couple of shirts you could give me, old shirts of your husband's?' I said, 'Oh, I'm so very sorry. My husband hasn't anything but old shirts, really. That's all he has right now. And he wears those.' He said, 'Lady, if I get extra ones, I'll come back and give them to you.'" In this quote, we can see that people were desperate and they wanted to find resources, but they were also willing to help others.
Companies began firing their workers because they needed their profit to stay as stable as possible. They couldn't afford to pay for their workers' salary because the demand was very low. Let me put it this way. You have supply and demand. Supply is what you have to make your products, and demand is whenever people are asking for your products.
Would you imagine living in a country where people sold their children and having a president that wouldn't do anything about it? Well, this occurred in the United States for most of Herbert Hoover's presidency. The situation began to change when Franklin Delano Roosevelt took office in 1933.
In his inaugural speech, FDR said, "We were in fact invaded by a foreign foe." He was referring to the 1920s, when people were used to enjoy the upward economy. But then, in 1929, they suffered a sudden but expected by a few drop.
President Roosevelt proposed a New Deal in order to get the country out of the Great Depression. The New Deal included several aspects. For example, the Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC, that helped unemployed young men 18 to 25 years old. Or the Agriculture Adjustment Act, or AAA, that helped farmers by paying them not to grow crops. Also, the National Industrial Recovery Act, or NIRA, that helped businesses by requiring that businesses in the same industry cooperate with each other to set prices and output. Or the Public Works Administration, or PWA, that provided public works jobs for many of those that needed relief. Also, the Federal Security Act, that helped investors restore the confidence in the market. Also, the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, that provided increased government regulation for deposits in many banks. And also the Tennessee Valley Authority, or TVA, that helped build dams and other projects along the Tennessee River and its tributaries.
During the Great Depression, we can see how Roosevelt's various programs actually help improve people's lives in testimonies from people during those days, like Tom Vinciguerra. As the troubled 30s rolled on, Roosevelt's alphabet soup, PA, CCC, etc., worked its magic. Our lives improved.
People were so used to the president not doing anything to help them that they were thrilled when FDR began doing so, that they even thought it was some sort of magic. The Great Depression was so huge that it not only affected the United States, but also many other countries. For example, Guatemala, where the problem also affected their economy. I think public order and stability constitute an indispensable condition for economic development. In this speech, we can clearly see that President Ubico is addressing a couple solutions to the economic depression occurring in the country. We can see that he advises people to remain calm and to maintain public order for the economy to be able to develop. President Jorge Ubico also passed 3 big laws in order to try to improve the economy. These 3 laws could be found in a book titled The Brief Economic History of Guatemala in the 20th Century. These 3 laws were: Law 1. In order to maintain roads from farms to ports in optimal conditions, he authorized a law in which all males from ages 18 to 50 needed to work on roads for 2 weeks, unless they could afford to pay a tax of 2 quetzales. Law 2. He punished vagrancy. For all the people who didn't own land, they needed to demonstrate that they had worked from 100 to 150 days. All workers needed to keep a journal as a proof that they had worked, or they were forced to work in public works. Law 3. Landowners were not punished for any crime committed against someone found stealing in their property. All these three laws were meant to improve the economy in the country. During the years before the Great Depression, the continuously rising economy in the United States kept prices high in many countries. Guatemalan economy depended on coffee, which had a very high price. When the Great Depression began, the prices of coffee and other Guatemalan products dropped drastically, causing the economy to suffer.
In this graph, we can appreciate how the prices of coffee had been changing since 1789. There, in a small red box, you can see a drop signalized, which represents 1932, the year in which the Great Depression truly affected coffee in Guatemala.
The Great Depression was so transcendent that even in this century, people keep trying to analyze it. In 2009, in a local newspaper, we can see several facts about the Great Depression. The whole economy dropped, imports fell by half, 5 out of the 11 banks went bankrupt, tax collection collapsed, 14 million raised in 1927 against 8 million raised in 1933. In this newspaper, we can see what the impact of the Great Depression was in the economy in Guatemala. This was the scenery that President Jorge Ubico encountered when he took office in 1931. He was aware of how previous presidents had wasted money unnecessarily, and he wanted to do things differently. He decided to make several reforms, including one when he lowered both the salaries of workers and the prices of goods. This reform allowed the people, even the poorest ones, to afford the basic needs. Even though these reforms enabled him to improve the economy in the country, he made a serious mistake. He began using slave work in order to build roads and even the National Palace.
Ubico's proposition for slave labor didn't really help the economy because people weren't making any money while they worked, and since they weren't making money, they couldn't buy things. And since they couldn't buy things, those companies couldn't make any profit. And we can see that cycle that was occurring in the United States repeated itself in Guatemala.
Throughout history, several events similar to the Great Depression have occurred. For example, the economic recession that occurred in 2008. The Great Depression and these other events that occur later on are all proof that no matter how stable the economy may seem, it can always drop, causing the economic downfall, just like it occurred in 1929 during the Great Depression.